Good morning. Welcome to our honored guests, delegates, and my dear colleagues. My name is Shailaja, and I will be your MC throughout the day for this program. We would now like to commence today's proceedings. I welcome to the dais our most esteemed panelists for the inaugural session. Bharat Ratna Professor N R Rao. Welcome. Please, sir. Principal Secretary, Primary and Secondary Education, Government of Karnataka, Shri Kapil Mohan. Director, Future Agenda, Dr. Tim Jones. Business Head, TCS ION, Shri Venkatarao Mallineni. And our esteemed host for the day, our own Director NIAS, Professor Baldev Raj. May I now introduce our opening speaker, Professor Baldev Raj, although he needs no introduction really. Professor Baldev Raj is the Director of the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore, one of India's leading multidisciplinary institutions. A distinguished scientist and former director of the Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research, Kalpakkam, Dr. Baldev Raj has helped advance several challenging technologies, notably in the field of atomic energy. He has pursued his work in interdisciplinary domains of energy, cultural heritage, medical technologies, nanoscience, and education. He is known for overcoming the barriers of academic research and industry with leadership acumen and tremendous experience. Welcome, Professor Raj. Professor Raj will now extend the welcome address and set out the workshop objectives. Professor Baldev Raj.
Good morning to all of you. Respected Bharat Ratna Professor N R Rao, we are delighted, sir, with your presence. He is a teacher always. Professor N R Rao is a teacher always, and the amount of efforts and cares he takes to teach not only the science, frontiers of science, but going to remote places to inspire children, to feel children, to tell them about science, he is remarkable. Amidst his all the schedules, his time on teaching to the young children and to all of us. In fact, I'm also a student, so he can teach at any age. So we are privileged and we are looking forward to you for showing us all the life what you have thought and what we can do more in the education so that we bring up our children which would solve our challenges. Kapil Mohan, the Secretary, Department of Education, Government of Karnataka, we are delighted with your presence. NIAS, we are in Karnataka. We are in Indian Institute of Science, we are in Karnataka. So whatever we do, we must do something to enrich Karnataka. We have to be playing a very close role to Karnataka, and we have been interfacing with them on culture and heritage, in education, in energy, and we always look forward to work with them together. We are delighted that Dr. Tim Jones is here. He is the Director of the Future Agenda. Future Agenda is a very catchy thing because all of us know that the future is not same as today. So the agenda for future would be different. So he has been piloting a series of workshops, and rightly so, the education is one of the key things. This current workshop is capping, I believe, 6 workshops which have happened already in this field in various parts of the world. And this workshop would cap it, and then we'd see that what we can really recommend. You'd hear more from him as he comes along. Mr. Venkatarao from ION, Business Head of Education. We all know the interest of Tatas into the education. That interest has never gone away. It is today also retained when I talk to Mr. Natarajan Chandrasekhar, I talk to other leaders in Tata. I think their interest in education is eternal. And that is how they are here with us as partners. They have a large experience in the working together of the hybrid and the teacher to be able to provide the education which is very relevant to us today. Professor Anitha Kurup, whom I have known only for last 9 or 10 months, is a passionate educationist who wants to work at the end of the spectrum, gifted children and also the marginalized tribal children and all that, and see that how we can make a difference to education. She is the organizer, I am the host. Dr. Shailaja Sharma, who came in, and I remember when she came in and brought this proposal of doing a workshop, our first reaction, both Anitha and mine reaction, was that, oh, we have heard much about education. What more we can add to it? And let us not do it. One more. And then we said, why don't you prepare? We had discussion for 1 hour, and then we said, why don't you prepare a concept paper? And if we find something really we can contribute, then we would be happy to consider it. And after a few meetings, we did have a concept paper. And that was the paper with which we approach you to be able to contribute. And it is so nice of you. I don't remember anyone said no. To whomsoever we wrote, all said yes. Within this concept and the themes which you have chosen, we all can contribute to the thing. I wouldn't go to those concepts and themes because they are there with you. I can only say that we were very keen to bring the people who have made a difference to the education. And only those who have made a difference and who are very passionate to see the improvements, who have the convictions but who don't have the rigidity of the things, who are ready to learn and contribute to the future of the education, and even look at what do we call the teachers is the future of education. Yes, the teachers have to change. Students, are they going to change? I think child, when he comes to the world, I believe the child doesn't know he has come in 21st century or he is born in 19th century. We only make the child realize that you have come in 21st century. It's a different place than maybe what you would have thought of. So how the teachers, how the ecosystems, how do the parents play a role, what are the pedagogies? Does it really contribute to the education? These are very intellectual exercises we all do. Of course, no sensible professional can deny that the best practices, pedagogies always help anything you are pursuing. But when we look at a personal life, I can say with great confidence, it is my mother and a primary teacher and one more teacher in a high school, and that is all. I didn't know till many years later that what was really which changed me in the hands of those people. And even today, you meet a person and then you are changed. Maybe you are not changed for all the time, but you are changed for quite a long time, and you also have a change thinking. Not to say so because Professor N R Rao is present. Every meeting which you attend with Professor N R Rao, it inspires you, it rededicates you to your cause, to the country. You might be just a listener. You might not have even participated in the discussions, but just thinking as to how things can be done, it comes just to him, which appears to us just, but which is based on his lifelong learning and all that. Teacher is something which is beyond all that. So I think to me the future of education is in the hands of the teacher. It's in the hands of ecosystems. I still remember that the school where I went, the daughter of the richest person was also studying. I came from a reasonably poor family and I was also studying. Many came from different backgrounds. We had all inequalities of various kinds, but the ecosystem of the school and the care and approach of the teacher didn't allow us to feel, even when we finished the school, that we had those inequalities. And each one of us was cared collectively and separately also. How the teacher had that magic of doing certain things collectively with us, and still we thought teacher is like a mother or a father to us, and he would take very, very special care for us. I think wherever in the system, ecosystem I'd call it, and ecosystem to me is, please don't think of that it is a very good canvas with a very organized thing. Ecosystem to me is a messy thing where creativity prevails and the honesty prevails. And it is not right to imagine ecosystem to be very organized, and many of the schools and colleges try to produce a very, very good canvas of the ecosystem, which is nothing, which is not an ecosystem. Ecosystem, if you look at nature, is a messy, creative system which is enjoying itself and who knows nothing but honesty and conviction of doing the things and responding in a very robust manner, So do we have the ecosystem, do we have the teachers and all that? So to me, on top of the agenda is the inequalities, because inequality is really destroying the future in all the ways. So while educating, how do we really have the ecosystem? Also learning. Teaching is important. We can't do many things unless a good teacher teaches us, but learning is also very important. And how do we learning? How we learn to fail? How do we learn to experiment? How do we learn to have fun? Today when I talk to the grandsons, we have 4 grandsons, just 6-7 years, they don't seem to have fun in learning. It's all so much loaded onto them, and they feel very happy because whatever I was learning at 10 years, I believe they are learning at 4 years. So parents seem to be very happy there, but I feel there is something which has to be really thought of. We have very distinguished colleague over here, Professor Narasimha, who is a philosopher basically. And we have been engaging with him that how the culture and education can stay together. We have to do our education in our culture. And he has looked at, because he is a professional, he says there are not much thoughts given as to how we can, some teachers may do it in a sublime way out of their intuitions, but there is no structured way where we have incorporated culture into our education. So this is another important thing for us. Today is a good day to have this workshop because today is a birthday of J.R.D. Tata. 29th July 1904, J.R.D. Tata was born. And what a person. Those who have seen and met Professor N R Rao would have met and known him for the most, but I had the privilege of meeting him on a few times because he was the commission member of Atomic Energy Commission. Sublime, elegant, thinker, confident, a person who envisioned this institute. And our purpose was very simple. Stay simple, don't grow big, do things which are relevant, agree and disagree with pleasure. Those who have disagreed, maybe they would agree later, or they have a strong reason to disagree with you because they are convinced that the democracy is not the right way and they have a different path to pursue, and work in teams. So I think we try to sustain that kind of a thing. So on the birthday of J.R.D. Tata, it's very, very delightful that we are discussing future of education. And we have Professor N R Rao to really enlighten us. We have Secretary Education because we want to work closely, because one thing I have learned in all my work is that you need good bureaucracy, you need good patronage to be able to do something. Otherwise the thoughts remains thoughts. We are not philosophers. We are here to do something and to make changes. He is here and Venkatarao is here. Tatas have been always a partner. We exist because of Tatas, because they give us the money and the structure to do it. So you are here, and I think all of you are here, and I can say as much as I have said for the persons on the dais about all of you, because we have worked very hard to see that who should be here. To start with, we said we'd be only 25 people, but when we wrote, finally we got 50, and that we said, no, this is all what people we wanted, and we thought our success rate would be something like that, but all of you came here. it makes it all the more important. And each one of you are going to have the opportunity to work in a groups to make the recommendations which would finally see that whether we can move forward or we have learned, we have enjoyed a day, and we all go enriched. And maybe I would not be unhappy to say at the end, we have no recommendations on future of education. That would also be all right. It would be a good deduction. But I think we'd work and then see how it happens. Thank you very much.
I have some recommendations. Thank you, Professor Raj. Dr. Tim Jones is Program Director, Future Agenda, Global Open Foresight Project. He's also a founder of the Growth Agenda Network and leads the Innovation Leaders Research Project. Tim is an expert in innovation, growth, and foresight, advises a wide range of organizations on these issues. Tim has been traveling all over the world, as Professor Raj mentioned. He has made a pit stop in Delhi and Mumbai before he arrived in Bangalore last night. Welcome, Tim.
For the invitation, thank you very much for the introductions, and it's lovely to be here. As Shalaja mentioned, we're at the end of rather a ridiculously ambitious project. Since February, we've done 100 workshops in 52 countries, in 52 cities in 40 countries, and education has been a real important part of that. So my intention, just to sort of for the next 10 minutes, is just to share some perspectives that we've picked up as we've gone around the world talking to people, and some of them may resonate, and some of them you may think, no, we don't agree. These are the opinions of people such as yourselves around the world who are in many ways involved in or experts in education or have an opinion. So that's my job today, is really to act as their voice and to show you what other people are thinking and see what that means, and maybe help stimulate some conversations as we go through today. Just a little bit of context. I think everybody will recognize that nobody can predict the future. It's impossible. The best we can do is anticipate it. And if we're going to be better at anticipating the future, we need to understand as much as what's happening outside our area, outside our country, outside our industry, as much as what's happening inside. Because the future is probably going to be a combination of internal and external drivers. And if we can bring those two together, then maybe we can have a better view of what may happen and be better prepared, and then hopefully make some more intelligent decisions. So the whole context behind the Future Agenda program is to talk to as many informed people as possible. We ran this program 5 years ago with the support of Vodafone around the world. This was the front cover of the book that came out of it, which has caused a lot of interest, particularly in Australia and Canada. But also it's raised people's questions to say, well, what's going on there? And that's the world if you resized every country by population. So you had even population distribution. And for me, it just shows why so many people around the world are so interested in what's going on in India in that context. But the Future Agenda program is all about trying to listen to as many different people. Nobody has the answer. And the opinion of a prime minister is necessarily no more important than the opinion of a 14-year-old schoolgirl. So let's try and talk to as many people about what they think, because the next 10 years is as much down to what people make of it as to what is forced upon them. So the first program 5 years ago was a great success and involved many organizations, many governments. This time we've really scaled it up. We've had hosts all around the world. We've been from everywhere, from the bottom of Argentina to Shanghai. We've been to Australia, Dubai, South Africa, all over. We've been to Canada and Beirut. So lots of expected places, but also some unexpected places. We've had 25 topics under discussion, and each of those topics has been a separate conversation, but there's been crossover. So as you can imagine, if you have a topic like the future of food, when you have conversations around that, you get lots of information about food, but also when you have conversations around the future of water, or the future of cities, or the future of health, people say things around food as well. So there's been a wonderful crossover. And in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to be synthesizing everything and then sharing everything back out. And the whole purpose of this program is everybody who participates gets access to everything. Not just the conversation they're part of, but they get access to all 100 conversations all the content, and hopefully therefore people can make better opinions. So that's the context behind the programme. I'm just going to show you some of the thoughts. Now, we were very lucky to have Sugata Mitra, who I'm sure you know, start the whole thing off. And he said, okay, this is what I think. And he was very brave to say, this is what I think, and I'm very happy for people around the world to challenge it. So for anybody who's followed his hole in the wall and subsequent work, will know that he's a big advocate of how technology can help education. And the whole concept of the idea of a school in the cloud, where, as he says, that schools aren't structured like factories, but they are more networked and more amorphous, is one of his key perspectives. As a reaction to that, this was a discussion in London, was that maybe we need to stop thinking about education as something which is linear, and therefore something which people tap into at different parts of their life. We had conversations around education for children, but also learning, adult learning, all the way through as people get older. And the perspective was very much that non-linear education is the world we are quickly moving into. So we need to be aware that that has its benefits, but also has its challenges. So how do we structure that? How do we monitor that? And how, most importantly, how do we benchmark and give recognition for that? In conversations in South America, in Ecuador, in Quito, one of the big challenges they had was the role of private education versus public education. They're very keen, clearly, on increasing the performance of state education. And for them, one of the perspectives was, should private education set the standards that state education meets, or how do those two work together? So a really interesting, deep discussions, not just in Ecuador, but also in Colombia and in Brazil, about the nuance between private and public education in South America and how that's evolving. In Dubai, one of the interesting things for me in Dubai was very strong pushback against the problems of teaching everything in English. There was concerns that because English was becoming the standard language for education, that polarizing Arabic, and was that because everybody was trying to focus on English as the primary 24/7 education language, was that pushing the Arabic culture out of schools and into either only into home or into other areas? So one of the big concerns that took place in the conversations there was how Western influence is influencing the values that are being used within the education system, and whether maybe it's gone a little bit too far and needs to be brought back a little bit. And this was a conversation that took place, hosted by the British Council, who partnered us throughout, but also with the SP Jain Management School in Dubai. So it was an interesting crossover of cultures and different perspectives. In Istanbul, we had very interesting perspectives that maybe the days of teachers standing, like we're all standing today, in front of people and sharing content are gone. Why should anybody listen to anybody standing in front of them when there's probably a really good video on YouTube, or the world's best accountant's teacher is available on a MOOC, so why should you have a second-rate teacher in front of you? And therefore maybe what was suggested was in Istanbul was maybe we switch to a role where teachers are no longer providers of content, but are increasingly coaches, using the best content from anywhere in the world, but helping students understand, either physically in the room or outside the room, how best to use the content and how best to learn and how best to navigate. So interesting for me that thought came out of some of the other conversations, but a really intensive day in Istanbul, which obviously Turkey's in an interesting situation at the moment, and lots of concerns around how the education system is being influenced by government or not. But it was very interesting that quite a provocative point of view about a completely different role of teachers came out of Istanbul. We had a conversation in Mumbai about a month ago, and one of the big, there was about 100 people for the afternoon, And one person said, look, it's very good to talk about all this technology-enabled world where we can access people, but what about empathy? And what about failure? We need to make sure that we help people with the real lessons of life just as much as an ideal future, because we need to have this in balance. So it was an interesting perspective, which then we took this and got more comments on around the world. So having a balanced view, making sure that empathy, ethics, and understanding ambiguity were all part of the mix. In South Africa 2 weeks ago, very strong view. If children are hungry, they're never going to learn. We can, South Africa is spending 15% of its GDP on healthcare, and yet is not getting the results that you would expect with that level of investment. And one of the issues that came up time and time again was there's no point in having fantastic investment in education if you haven't got the other stuff sorted. Then the same, not just with hunger, but also with sanitation. You've got to have the basics covered before all the wonderful stuff is really going to have impact. And then finally, we on Saturday we had another event in Mumbai which brought all these together. And there's round about, if you look on the Future Agenda website, there's about 50, 60 different points of view on education which are now all there. So I'm just giving you a very quick sample. But it's interesting as to when we put them all on the wall, and there's a few outside as posters, how many people react to them and say, I agree with that, I disagree with that. But as we went back to Mumbai last week, yes, all the technology conversation was still there, and lots of support for the whole school in the cloud perspective. Yes, there was lots of conversation about the changing roles of teachers and the support of what was talked about in Istanbul. There was also two other things. There was the perspective about international measures. If we're increasingly encouraging students to not just be part of one institution, but be part of multiple institutions, how do we have, and the international education market is getting increasingly competitive, what standards do we have? And then lastly, continuing to come back and back and back, let's really try and crack the focus on female education. It's been talked about for years. It's something which has clearly been a UN Millennium Development Goal, but we haven't solved it yet. So what are what are the additional things that can be done, particularly in rural areas, but particularly in some key countries, to really bring that balance back together? So as I said, very short, quick run through. That was designed to give you a flavour of what we've heard. All the information is available on the website, and maybe as we go through today, we can talk a little bit more about some of the suggestions that have been made around the world. As I said right at the beginning, nobody's trying to say this is the single answer. We're just trying to get as many informed people to share their different views, and let's see how they matter and how they impact in different worlds. So thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Venkatarao Mallineni, who's the head of ION Education Solutions, TCS, and has over 23 years of rich and varied experience at senior managerial levels in private, public, and government sectors in IT, internet and communications domains. He has unique experience of working with startup organizations, building long-lasting culture with highly agile teams to make them commercially successful in global markets. Currently, as a head of ION Education at TCS, he is responsible for growing the presence of ION solutions in education vertical in the K-12, higher education, and vocational sectors in the market. Shri Venkatarao Mallineni.
Thanks. Good morning for everyone. I'm glad to be here in front of professors, researchers, and academic community. So, like anybody, I am also a student in front of teachers gathering. Next 10 minutes, I would like to share some of my experiences with role of technology. More specifically from the industry, how past few years I am working in the education. So we always have feeling technology is good, bad. So various discussions happen. Let us look back past 20 years, because banking is something which is more relevant for our lives. 20 years back, how banking used to be there. Banking used to provide only keeping the money and retrieving the money. Going to the bank, long queues. Okay? Then it has come up, huge agenda of nationalization, and then the technology has to be built. Today, where we are? Today, banking happens in banking as institutes transformed as a full financial services. That is one element. The service provider, that is the interaction within the bank to whomever we are meeting, that individual transformed as a financial advisor. And the consumer, we transformed, look at banks to consume, whether it is utilities payments, but anything. Bank is our single source. But how technology has played in this transformation over the years? Initially, technology played a role to automate certain bank-related processes within the bank. They were not exposed to the consumer. But there is a phase of internet has come. Internet has transformed, keeping it available through the ATMs or through internet banking, come closer to the consumer. Do you agree or not? Past 3 years, how many of you use mobile banking? Internet banking? Most. So, the next step that is coming is mobile banking. So, what is happening? Technology is empowering the consumer. Do you agree or not? Did any core functions of banking has gone away? Actually, it has transformed, is a completion of plethora of services to provide us proper advice, whether it is loan matter, whether it is mutual funds, including utility payments. So, full service provider. Why all these things are possible? Just because of there is a technology enablement. It has not damaged any of the core functions, including RBI. RBI role still much more strengthened. There is uniformity of interest rates across the bank. There is a lot of transparency. But there are also negative side of it. Thefts happen, ATM thefts happen, online thefts happen. That is a security. You have security problem in the physical space as well as in virtual space. So as a consumer, we do banking two spaces, physical space and digital space. Digital space is instantaneously accessible. Anytime, there are no physical boundaries. Do you agree or not? Physical space, which has not immediate in nature, could be a loan, which requires a lot of, so both are relevant in today's world. So what it shows is, by default, digital is in our part of life. We cannot avoid. Do you agree with me or not? Okay? Physical is already there. So when we move to education, it is going to happen. It is a matter of time, whether we are part of it or we are not part of it. Very simple. Because that's how the universe evolves by itself. Okay? Because this time lag always between an industry or between a society or between a country, geography and all. But it has to happen. What technology has impacted in the banking is inclusivity and diversity. Do you agree with me or not? So there is a lot of reachability and integrating with government schemes to bring transparency. There are a lot more things are happening. Okay. We will come to today's topic of education, so that during the day, probably all of you, when you discuss, look at it from a holistic perspective, because I have seen past 20 years in the technology space, from the telecommunication to the e-governance to the various verticals. Always there is an aberration about the technology for resistance. Then people will observe. Unknowingly, they will become participate as part of it. That is the third phase. Whether you like it or not, individual like it or not, that comes into this. So education is no more difference as far as for me is concerned individual, because that's what I have seen. So in the education also, the good thing is, if we look at from a holistic perspective, stakeholder perspective, the way I define business, here we cannot say consumer or whatever. In that place, we have a learner, student. That learner in the 21st century education perspective, it is a continuous learner definition. The second stakeholder is, in the same learner aspect, there is a sponsor parent, and we have teacher, and we have an institute, we have regulatory bodies, whether it is a board or a university, all are relevant in the technology cannot replace any one of these core elements. Technology can only enable and create one more space, digital space for learning, moving from a what is not relevant or what is not being provided in the classroom can be enabled beyond the class learning. So those interventions of accessing the content today, I can only be accessed in the library, I can only access from a teacher, can be available to the student. So there is a learning enhancement for a slow learner can happen. So the speed learner who can get in the classroom, but the slow learner can get it through more exercises, more homeworks, more interventions. And today what is happening is assessment is becoming a learning strategy. Quickly, the same day, whatever has been taught, if there is a quiz or assessment that can happen at home. So how to engage the student beyond the class, technology can provide through cloud, through various means. The third aspect is, even Prime Minister has spoken about profiling tests, which is very prevalent. Today there is a challenge how the career, choosing a career. 70% students have that problem. If there is a good analytics that are tracked throughout the history of from the schooling side, how the student progression is happening in various subjects, interests, that will help parents also. Yes, one can become artist, one can become scientist, the other can choose different fields of interest. Today it is highly impossible until unless the individual spelt it out. That's where technologies can. So from a student excellence perspective, what kind of technologies to be used? That is one aspect. The second one, teacher. Teacher, as Tim has indicated, teacher role is transforming like a coach, competency coach, I would call it as. Because we have moved to the society where nuclear families, where earlier school used to provide the knowledge, then there is an experiential learning used to happen in the society in the form of marriage or some functions. But those are all eroded. Now everything, the institute has to play a skill upliftment or competency or a complete professional for 21st century, whether it could be leadership, entrepreneurship, everything we are looking at one single place. Then it becomes teacher as a coach, bringing relevant pipes through technology, whether it is an industry, recognition or lab integration or research community, and individually, because today tools, technologies are available for teacher to empower, access teacher aids, or being in community, subject matter expertise to communicate, collaborate. The way today we are assembling, it is a learning exercise which we are going to do, and an outcome could be with some action points. Similar things can happen over the virtual space, extended. The institutions, today we are actually within TCS, past 2 years, we have done a lot of transformational work for institutions, starting from admissions, fees automation, because these are all very transactional in nature. For planning, there are a number of tools and technologies are available, including compliance management. Much of administrative work is basically providing student data to the boards, meeting the government compliances, whether it is child safety norms, RTE, all those things, if given to technology, and then the teacher space and other time is much more available for more academic and giving it to the student. That's where technology can help. The fourth element for the governing bodies. See, today students are also expecting, once the board exams are clear, within 10 days they are expecting, speed at which answers can come, means the board results can come. We have done some interventions last couple of years with some of the boards, with digital evaluation platforms, where the movement of the answer sheets and all minimized, so that faculty can, within the, wherever the schools are there, they can be able to swiftly evaluate, and results publishing can happen. Some of the students who wants to do improvement, so without missing any academic, before academic session starts, even improvement exams are provided. So what it means is, technologies are available today, but those technologies, how much they are relevant for the education industry is one of the key components for us to ask ourselves. Because if certain technologies are not available, for example, for a lab, creating lab 3D printing, yes, technology is today available only in the Western countries. The next question, is it accessible, the technology? Is it affordable? Is it relevant at this point of time? Because technology adoption also is a time cycle. Because technology is there, I can affordable, if you just deploy, we may get failure. Because we have seen many projects, because the timing is not right and the methodology to which it has to be adopted. Because technology is again a passive, until unless we build a lot of cognitive inputs, analytics, then technology has power to build another subconscious mind for human being on the device. Do you agree or not? Today what is happening? Our mobile is becoming subconscious mind for us. This is where I just would like to leave, so that the role of technology is definitely relevant, but on the parameters on which we have to make the choices. Thanks again for giving this great opportunity, and look forward to discuss in the sessions. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mallineni. Our next speaker is Shri Kapil Mohan, IAS, Principal Secretary to Government of Karnataka Primary and Secondary Education. He was previously Managing Director of Krishna Bhagya Jala Nigam Limited, which was responsible for the development, operation and maintenance of irrigation systems in Upper Karnataka project area. In 2013, he was selected as one of the 60 fellows who have made a transformational impact in 60 years of the Eisenhower Fellowships. Thank you for your presence, Shri Kapil Mohan.
Good morning. Bharat Ratna, Professor Rao, Professor Baldev Raj, Mr. Jones, Mr. Rao again. I will confess at the very start that I am a very recent entrant to the educational field, particularly to the primary education field, if we exclude my own education and that of my children's education. Apart from that, my knowledge of education is very, very recent. So I am overwhelmed to be called here. But I must say, in the period which I have been here, I am overwhelmed by the literature, by the advice, and by the institutions which are working in this field, which brings confidence into me that there are a lot of people thinking about the future of the education. So I can only manage education, which itself is quite a handful. My job is up to education up to 12th grade. We have about 13 million children in our state only, for the Karnataka, 80,000 odd schools, and 5 lakh teachers, of which about 2/3 or about 70% is government. The rest is private educational institutions. We do have a role even in the private education institutions, that is of regulator and to some extent facilitator. Our focus till now has been on access to education. And there were a lot of intervention, very significant interventions which had been made by the governments in the past. We can take it with some little bit of pinch of salt to say that as far as access to education, purely in its meaning, we have reached some kind of finality. There is no end to this. I mean, I do not wish to debate as that to say we do have schools, we do have some very, very basic infrastructure, and access to education is there. But now, of course, the issues which are arising out of this massive expansion of educational infrastructure is actually coming to the fore, and which is the quality. And the quality is not really up to the mark. It's a fact. In the last 4 or 5 years, there also has been a trend where the enrollment in the government schools is coming down at the rate of about 1.5% to 2% per annum. Now, this is not only true for Karnataka, it's true for the whole country per se. There could be many factors. One of the factors, of course, is the language policy, which parents have a role to say. The other could be quality as well. We really do not know, but that's a trend. Now, our reaction to that has been to incentivize education, some about midday meal schemes. We give uniforms, shoes, bicycles, free textbooks, scholarships, and so on and so forth. There are clutch of the schemes, and these are the incentives which we give. We also have a massive program for training of the teachers to upgrade their skill sets and other things. And then, of course, we had, as a part of a national drive, come to a stage where actually you can practically glide through up to SLC without really being tested upon it. Well, that was, I think, it was a reaction to the student stress and things like that. But this is my personal opinion, but I think even on an institutional level, we are finding that there has to be a comeback for testing in some form or the other. It can be non-stressful testing, but how do we say at a gross level that the quality has improved? We can say that quality is good. If you ask any school teacher, they will always say our quality is good. But it has to be tested against a uniformly accepted parameter. Then only we will be agreeable to that. So some sort of testing we would like to be introducing in the near future. I hope we are able to implement that, because there could be reaction towards this thing and all. I believe this session had a strong technology flavor, and there is a real and genuine worry that there would be digital divide, and students, those who are in the rural areas, would be left behind, and things like that. We do have certain programs. I don't want to go into that. At a very large scale, we have a program known as ICT, which of course is an acronym, and we are covering about 5,500 schools. Which would create some infrastructure for basic computer literacy. And then we are going to cover more and more schools as we come across. Of course, when we implement this at a very vast scale, and in the hinterlands, many issues come. I mean, despite whatever 4G we may have in Bangalore, we do not have even basic internet connectivity in almost 40 to 50% of the state, where most of the schools we do serve over there. Then we have a tele-education program, which is a homegrown initiative. So we are implementing it with IIM Bangalore. It's a desi version of MOOC, Mr. Jones, utilizing Indian Jugaad, if I may say so. So we have some spare transponder capacity which has been utilized for doing tele-education, which is personalized to some extent, which is able to saddle the issue to some extent of delivering this education and without the personal interaction. Now the next phase, what we are into it, we have done it only for a year. Of course, we are upscaling it. The other phase which we are doing is to train our teachers to go to the role of what was being said here as a coach and facilitator. This can only be assistive. So, and what I can hear from the teachers in whose school this has been implemented is that this at best can assist. It cannot replace the teachers. So we are trying to have some training program in this phase to see that we scale it up to another 1,000 schools, but also to train the teachers for using this as a tool, as a part of their educational teaching. And then of course we have EduSat, which you all I think know about it. It is one way though, that's a major weakness. Tele-education is partially two-way. The jugaad element is that the interaction of the student with the master teacher is through mobile phones because the bandwidth is one way. And then, of course, we have other initiatives as tests and other things which target the skill sets of the teacher in this. One issue is, of course, of computer literacy, delivering it at the school level with its own attendant challenges. The second is of using IT for delivery of the education. So we are working at both. The ICT is for the first and the tele-education and so on and so forth exams for the second. But we believe even the second has its own impact on the teachers. Now coming to the skills. There's been a lot of discussion about skills in our country, and a lot of skills are there. In the grades from 9th to 12th, we are trying to introduce skills. We have identified certain areas. It is an exercise which has both hardware and software elements, if I may permit it to use the word. And we are creating the hardware as of now. But we would like to link these skills to actual job and employment. So these are not the higher order skills which we are talking of. We are talking of medium low range skills of this thing. So we are working on those. Again, for us, scale is important. We are doing it in 500 schools. As far as issues like values, ethics, critical thinking are concerned, these are very difficult to put in a programmatic mode. I mean, you can talk about it. The general reaction would be that we are training people to do that. But I really do not think that we can train people in ethics, actually. It has to be inculcated. And the role of the family, parents, our society, per se, media these days, because of its so much dominant presence, I think all have a role to play in that. Schools, of course, have a very important role to play that. But to be very honest about it, one of the only substantive things which I can say is that we have tried to change our textbook a little bit so that subliminal messages are passed through this. And the revision of textbook in this part is going on this. There is a lot of interest on a public-private partnership basis in Bangalore, particularly Karnataka. A lot of institutions work on those things, and they're on all the issues which I have mentioned till now. We welcome those. Our touch point for that is DSERT. One representative is here, Mr. Lalit here. So if any of you wish to interact with him or also pass on certain messages, that is the point where we do that. But I would like to put any initiative which we do on triple P basis, that it should pass this 3-level test of sustainable, replicable, and scalable. One school wonders and 10 school wonders are personal initiatives for me. That's why I use those statistics at the start, are not as important as they are. I mean, I do understand they are very important in one particular school, but being responsible for education of 1.3 crore children, we really need to scale those up. And then if it passes that test, we adapt to that. So sometimes some disappointment for those people is there. As we build our educational infrastructure, particularly for grades 8 to 12, we have various programs in which we are covering physical infrastructure. Those gaps will be filled up in a couple of years. We will appreciate inputs both on the hardware side and of course the software. The software is what I said, very difficult to put on the programmatic mode through the DSRT. And I will end my address here. I only wanted to ask if Mrs. Pon Sankari from Kendriya Vidyalaya is in that. Namaskar, Amma. So I am an alumni of Kendriya Vidyalaya, I wanted to tell you. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Shri Kapil Mohan ji. Our final speaker is Bharat Ratna Professor N R Rao, who will deliver the inaugural address. Professor N R Rao needs no introduction. Nevertheless, a few lines. Professor N R Rao is a National Research Professor as well as Honorary President and Linus Pauling Research Professor at the Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research. He is a member of many of the major science academies of the world, including the Royal Society London, the National Academy of Sciences USA, the Russian Academy of Sciences, and so on. Professor Rao was the Chairman, Scientific Advisory Council to the Prime Minister during 2004 to 2014, and the past President of the Academy of Sciences for the world. We are incredibly honored by your presence, sir, today. Ladies and gentlemen, Bharat Ratna Professor N R Rao.
Friends, I'm very glad to be here. Actually, I was not sure that I would do any justice to the subject by giving a 20-minute talk, but I will do my best to say a few things. Unfortunately, many of them may sound like pronouncements because of the short time involved in the presentation. But let me tell you, I have been worried and concerned with education for at least last 30 to 40 years, participated in a whole bunch of national initiatives, tried to advise governments, ministers, prime ministers. And based on all that, I will summarize it in a few sentences of what I think is happening in India. Before I say anything, let me tell you, I hope your objectives in this meeting will be to concentrate on India and not worry too much about the rest of the world. Because as one of my friends said, if Finland wanted a dental filling, you can send the dental filling required for Finland, entire population of Finland in 2 bottles. If an Indian population wants it, you need a ship. One of my friends long ago said that. There's a very nice joke. We're a very large country. We're dealing with extraordinarily large population. Don't forget. Second, there is a tendency in this country, for example, the government say, we have done everything. We have tried that, we have succeeded, little that, little this. Just let's listen to that, keep quiet after that. The private schools say, what a wonderful education we are giving, charging 2 lakhs rupees a year for each student. But the problem remains, however, the large population of India, which you have to take into account. You go to Uttarakhand or Uttar Pradesh or even Karnataka, the populations we are dealing with extraordinarily large. There is no other country with whom you can compare, except maybe China. Even with China, there is some differences between China and India. Today I will not go into that. So we have this problem of very large numbers. No other country, no democracy has ever faced it before. As a past Prime Minister very nicely put it, Mr. Vajpayee, no country and no democracy has ever faced the problems of education, removal of poverty, providing good health, as India is facing today. No other country. Because of being a democracy. So if you're not a democracy, there are ways of doing it maybe. But anyway, that's one thing. Second, where are we at present? Nobody talked about that. So there's the rating of quality of education, school education that comes. Number 1 ranking is given to Finland. I hope you all know that. I think India comes way in the bottom somewhere. Even America comes pretty down. Finland is. The reason is the teacher in Finland is the most respected. Teaching profession is most respected. I think we should remember that. Okay, these are the few introductory remarks. And also don't forget the diversity in schools, as our secretary said. Extraordinary diversity. See, when I say that, I do it with direct experience of visiting schools of every kind in this country in many states in the interior India. Not Bangalore, Bombay, Chennai. Extraordinary diversity. We still have 1-teacher schools, even in this state. I think there are a few thousand or few hundred 1-teacher schools. I come from a family of teachers. My father was the education officer right in Bangalore, the headmaster of high school. My grandfather was also a teacher. My great-grandfather was also a teacher. It is one of those things where teaching and education runs in the family. My wife is also a teacher. Anyway, coming back to the real things, how do we plan this? You see, the governments have lost the right to talk about education. If you remember P.V. Narasimha Rao, when he was education minister, many of us helped him to write the national policy and education. He said at that time, we will invest 6% of the GDP in education. But even today, it's 2%. Even though we have wonderful, enthusiastic secretaries like Mr. Mohan here, they can do very little. The money available to them is so pathetic. 2% of all of education, including higher education. How can you do much with even the best of secretaries, best of ministers can do very little with such pathetic investment in India? Since most of the education of most of the people come through government. Forget about the private schools, so that the rich children can go there. So investment is something we must talk about. Unless we invest more, since the majority of the children are going to be affected by the government investment, I think this investment has to be more. Much more than that, the state investment even very poor. States supposed to give not only center, states also are investing very little in education. It is very easy to talk about curricula, how to improve, how to teach. That is the easiest part in improving school education. Because it's done in vacuum, it's applicable to everybody. It's more the universality about it. That's not the real issue. The real issue is teachers' investment. So many of you may not know, Baldev Raj will remember, I was the chairman of the previous, last Science Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. We convinced the then Planning Commission, unfortunately the Planning Commission is gone, to make next decade a decade of teachers and teaching. And they agreed, and they even declared in the plan that the next 10 years they will concentrate on teachers, improving the quality of teachers, their status in society, and also teaching profession. And of course, the Planning Commission itself is gone now, so I don't know what happened to that. But I really believe we should do a lot about teachers. Give them better salaries, give them more respect, like in Finland. Much more difficult to be a teacher in Finland than something else, which is more powerful in society here. Then, the infrastructure investment. If really you start investing enough money, including all the 80 good things that Mr. Rao talked about, in all the schools of India, I don't know whether you have estimated how much money it will cost. I don't think India can afford it for a very, very, very long time. It will cost so many billions of rupees. So that's what we have to therefore be practical in making those decisions. So I believe therefore, it is still the teacher who will play the role in India. Technology, yes, relative importance of technology will be there, but it is the teacher and do something about him. Because eventually the teacher in the village that will help that student. Technology up to a point, even though we may invest. Wherever we have invested nicely, even in the villages today, there have been success. For example, I was involved in setting up the Jawahar Navodaya Vidyalayas during Rajiv Gandhi's prime ministership. We had 525 schools, those 2.5 lakh students there. They can give a tough time to professors' children in Bangalore because they are given opportunities to learn better facilities and so on. So we have to do more like that. Set up more Navodaya Vidyalayas, or equivalent of that, in our villages in Karnataka. I've been telling our chief minister, at least 4 corners of Karnataka have equivalent of Navodaya Vidyalayas, started by Karnataka government. I think it will be wonderful. We are still going to take it up. Okay. The school infrastructure, I mentioned that. Here, state and central investment I talked about. And the question of language, I'm not going to talk about it. That is a very controversial issue, language of instruction and so on. But what I will, however, say is, to make our children internationally competitive, teach English from the beginning. And rest of the learning can be in mother tongue. English from the beginning. That is what my parents did. I'm a local Kannada medium student, by the way, up to high school. But English always, very, very important in my house. Everyone talked in English, but school I just studied in Kannada. I didn't suffer by that. Well, one other important thing that in India nobody talked about, because we're talking about India, but don't forget, not school education in vacuum. In India, as long ago somebody said, is an old statement in India, we have a very good examination system, but not an education system. Long ago people said about India. And it's really the exams which run the education system. It is not the education system which requires examinations. Examinations were meant to evaluate students, help them to improve, help them to grade themselves, something like that. What has happened now is entire country, the parents, children suffer. By the time it's April, May, they start preparing. In fact, none of the professors in this institute, not in this institute, Indian Institute of Science or Nehru Center, shows up to work because they are coaching their children for their 12th class exam, 10th class exam. In fact, it is the parents who take the exam. It is disgusting, actually. And I was shocked to find my grandson, he's doing very well now, he's a very senior doctor now. When he, with great difficulty, he got a seat in MBBS. To get that, my God, you have to take at least 8 to 10 exams just for the medical. If you also, I think, what have we done about that? This is affecting education. The examination system has destroyed Indian education system. There's no doubt. In fact, if the central government, in fact, Mr. Modi, we have sent a major recommendation to him. If we really want to save India, do something about examination system, various things like that. He will be ever remembered in India. We can give children a better way of facing the society, facing competition than what we have. After all, this problem doesn't exist anywhere except in India, this kind of a problem. I think it's frightening. It is frightening to be a child in India. I don't know whether you know that. The number of suicides last year, I don't know whether you counted, right in Bangalore. A child, just because in PUC this girl didn't get good marks, she commits suicide. What are we dealing with? So I think we should deal with the examination, how it is affecting education. So coming back to the more important things. Education is supposed to help, to be curiosity-driven. It is employment-driven. It is also driven by professionalism, people who want to be engineers, doctors, and so on. It has to produce future leaders. It has to do many things, future citizens, and all that. And we have to make sure there is a gender balance, make sure that our young women are properly protected. All these are aspects which I have not talked about. All these we have to look into. The most important thing is not to forget. My wife and I have devoted a lot of our effort and our personal money to do something for the education. In fact, half of the money I've earned in my life, we have donated for this. I tell you, wherever I go to, the below poverty line, I want to mention, is a special point of India. 37% of Indian population below poverty line, according to the latest statistics. I thought it had come down to 23%. Again, they have increased it to 37%. I don't know what is correct. Even if it's 25%. What are we going to do then? What are we going to do the children of contract labor? In fact, I want you to know there are two children. I mean, they are no longer children. They are two PhD students of mine. One of them, his father, is actually one of these Mahatma Gandhi, what yojana is that? He actually digs ditches on the wayside. And his son of illiterate parents, is one of the top students I have, one of the best students I have today. Somehow he had the opportunity. That's what he was saying. All of them don't get it. So those BPL families is a special consideration. It is just like in the world. In the United Nations, we worry, or in the world of academies, for example, we worry about the least developed countries especially. There are about 43 of them now. Like Nepal is in LDC, Bangladesh is still in LDC. Leaving them aside, lots of African countries are all LDCs, where whatever you talk about has no meaning because their problems are so different. So India does belong to that category, even though it is not a least developed country, economically and otherwise. When it comes to education and poverty, health, we are actually as bad as the LDCs. You see the world statistics, the ranking of India in terms of health, social conditions of our rural India, we are way down. So education is related to that. How do we do something about it so that people become more health conscious? People have become better aware of everything around them. Scientifically, they're more literate and so on. So I think this has to be looked into, how to make sure the common citizen of India, however poor, more literate, so scientifically literate. I don't mean science, literate in science, but kind of a science, scientific temper and so on. So schools have a lot to do with all these things. I'm sorry I just rushed through a whole bunch of things. I'll just close and just remind you of the major point. not to forget the population problem, because the few crores of children, I don't know, from the Radham Narasimha and myself, we wrote a report, Baldev is also involved in it. In the next 10 years, another additional 5 crores or 4.5 crores children will come for higher education. Additional. It is not, forget about the numbers now. Unbelievable numbers. How are we going to advise them of what to study? Skill development, as he was very nicely talking about. How are you going to advise them? So we made a recommendation to the previous Prime Minister. He agreed, and the previous government almost started it, but before that they lost the government. The present government, I hope, does that. It's high time we make a proper plan for our children. It is not another plan of the Planning Commission. How to take these large numbers, make sure those interested develop the right skills, those interested in science go to science, how many become doctors. Because the reason we are facing now in Bangalore is there are 67 engineering colleges in Bangalore. We can't say we'll have 100, 67, make it 75. No, that is not the way to cater to education. We have to do something else. We have to see that people get the right education after school or during school. So that planning has to be done by government. And unfortunately, government, including private, it need not be, I don't mean, somebody has to catalyze this major mission of planning for the future. Failing to plan is a very serious thing in a country of this kind. We have failed to plan education in India. I'm very sorry to say that. Though we have written national plan and so on, nothing really has happened. Major plan, proper plan, to take care of the crores and crores of children of India, since we are talking about schools, has it to be done. So I think one of the major recommendations, I hope, will be, there must be some mechanism. In fact, the previous government, they even were looking for a chairman, they even approached the chairman, they formed a committee. Somehow in that process, the government elections came and it just was forgotten. I'm sorry that they didn't do it. The present government, I hope, does that, because it takes about 2 or 3 years of very hard work. And then you must stick to those plans and see that states and center both cooperate in doing the right things in planning for education. That not been done, so that one has to think about the future. Since it is about the future that we are talking about today, I think it's all, according to what I saw, say schools are the future. You have to worry about the future, the numbers being larger than today, how you will plan it. I've tried to say a few things in a random fashion, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to be here to say discussions, but it's a very important topic, and in fact, the future of India is simply related to this. What we will do with India. In fact, I deal with a lot of countries. I go all over the world, particularly in recent years with China quite a bit. They have a different way of doing things. Their numbers are different, their planning is different. We cannot do the way the Chinese do. For example, if you take higher education, China decided to produce more graduates than anybody in the world. They are producing the largest number of graduates in science and engineering in the world. I asked them, what do you do with all of them? Because they can't employ all of them. Then they said, my friend is the president of the Chinese Academy, very powerful man. I told him, America produces 23,000 PhDs a year. China said, we'll produce 30,000. Everything is numbers. They want to be better than everybody. I said, what will you do? In fact, when I go there, this young girl comes to chaperone me all over, me or my wife, and wherever we go. I said, what are you doing? No, sir, I got my PhD 5 years ago. I did my postdoctorate in California and then in Cambridge. But now why are you doing public relations job? There's no other job. See, there are so many PhDs who will be sweeping the floor very soon. Because we can't do that. That is the trouble. That is the way we are different. You see, India, being a democracy, we can't end up with a few thousand PhDs without a job. Similarly, lots of school-going children after that without a future. This is the point I'm talking about. What will you do? Make sure there is a future for the educated child after school, or either a profession, employment, skill development, something we have to worry about, because a large population, and of course technology can help, but while I use technology in my laboratory, but as far as education is concerned, still I believe in India and elsewhere, the teacher will play an important. If technology could replace or more even take care of most education, why is America is not so successful? American school education is not very good. That, in fact, they're pretty pathetic. Why is that? It's only technology it is. There is a problem. So we'll have to think about that. We need the technology, how to use it in India. It's more clever about that. It is not some routine, mechanically you can't apply technology in India. It has to be much more a clever way of doing things. There is a way, we must find the way. So thank you very much. It's a wonderful subject and important subject. If you find a solution, you have saved India. Even if you don't find a solution, you have thought about a very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rao. We have exactly 5 minutes for a couple of questions. So with the permission of the esteemed panel over here, if there are a couple of questions we can take. So my suggestion is if you would raise your hands, then I'll just take 2 questions and then I will open it to the panel. Madam, and yourself, sir. Okay, after you. Yes, as you wish.
Good morning, sir. I am Sita Murthy. My question was, I was hoping to hear from you that what needs to be changed is more the design of the content. What is worth teaching in India right now for this generation is not being discussed much in the recent past. I'm more concerned about that because the processes are very well in place. The philosophy is not clear at all. What do we do about that?
Okay, we'll take the second question also and then I will ask the panelists to respond.
Good morning, sir. I'm Venugopal. Since you've, it's of course, a question is to Professor Rao, since he's been associated with all the major decisions of the government. If we look into our history of our educational policy, right from, in spite of having a very enlightened Prime Minister to begin with, what we find is for 1964 or 63, when Professor Kothari was appointed as the Education Commission, in spite of his statement that destiny of the nation is made inside the classroom, we don't find a consistency in our educational policy and no effort has been made from any of the expert committees to put in place a systematic educational policy. And I mean, over the years, from my experience, what I found, whether in school or in the higher education, because I would like to link it up with higher education also. If school education is going to be weak, higher education is automatically going to be weak. What I found is in India, here, to wherever I have gone, opening of the book is education and closing of the book is vacations.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you. So would the panel would like?
Well, as far as the content is concerned, I did mention, well, I think it's very, very important to discuss that. The real problem with content in India is there absolutely no teachers to teach them. In fact, that is the problem in higher education. Our teachers are terrible. They don't know, in fact, most of the teachers who teach science in the high schools don't have the necessary background to teach the science classes. In fact, their knowledge of science itself is so bad that they are unable to teach the class 12 chemistry or physics, for example. That's what everyone says. The teacher is, even the science content of education, content itself is so bad. Way of teaching, methodology, what should be the objectives of education, if you bring all that, you would have to train the teachers for that. According to me, training the teachers in a large way on how to teach, what to teach, is the first priority of India. Then, of course, we can improve the schools. Then we can say what to teach. The trouble is, I don't know whether you have gone to interiors of India. Who are you going to talk to? Those teachers themselves need a lot of help. And there are some very motivated teachers. I'm not saying they are not there, but they have limited facilities. They have nothing, in fact. You may not believe it. In fact, entire, I don't know whether you know Uttarakhand, in Puttaragar district, we go there every year to talk to all the children from the mountains, all over Himachal, all over Uttarakhand. Me and many of the professors in this institute, Indian Institute of Science and Nehru Center, there was not even one place where you could get 200 students in one place like this, have a lecture. So my wife and I donated money to build a lecture hall in Puttaragar. It's really bad situation. So then the teachers are enthusiastic. We have teachers program. They all want to do something, but they have nothing. They have no way to improve things. And their conditions are very, very bad. So we have to improve the condition of the teacher, qualification of the teacher, ability of the teacher, and give him more respect. I think they have to do that. According to me, unless you improve the teacher, content has no meaning at all, because only these special schools in Bangalore charging enormous fees, they will do that. And I'm not even interested in that, because they can do that without my help, but without our help. I'm worried about the average school of India, where 90% of the children go.
Yeah, unfortunately, run out of time. I hope that the answer addressed both the questions to an extent. I'd like to invite Professor Anitha Kurup to deliver the vote of thanks for this session. Thank you very much.
It gives me great pleasure and privilege to propose the vote of thanks to this august gathering. Let me at the outset place on record our sincere thanks to Bharata Ratna Professor N R Rao for accepting our invitation and delivering the inaugural address despite his extremely busy schedule. Professor Rao has, over the years that he has come to NIAS, has expressed deep interest in education. Today, I think he has flagged off extremely important questions, perhaps very difficult questions, which most of us do not even dare to ask. I hope this will sort of help our deliberations during the day. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Shri Kapil Mohan, Secretary, Department of Education, Government of Karnataka, who agreed to address the gathering in between his several engagements. NIAS is keen to work with the Government of Karnataka to take forward the deliberations of this workshop, and your presence in this workshop is extremely reassuring. TCS has been a long player in the field of education, particularly in its attempt to leverage technology to improve the overall quality of education. I think it's extremely important for us to see how do we leverage technology in a way that it would impact education in India differently, and it would actually give it the quality edge. Thank you so much for being a part of this inaugural session. We would like to thank Dr. Tim Jones, Director of Future Agenda, for choosing to collaborate with NIAS as a part of the global series on future of education. Bringing the perspectives from the different parts of the world has set the context for this workshop. NIAS has been fortunate to shape this workshop under the guidance of Professor Raj. Dr. Shailaja and I have worked very hard to bring this workshop to this stage, and we are hopeful we will have meaningful deliberations and tangible outcomes by the end of the day. I will fail in my duty if I do not thank all the esteemed delegates who have responded so enthusiastically to our invitation. Your participation is extremely valuable to us. As always, the NIAS administration, faculty, staff, and the director's office have always been a great support for us in organizing this workshop. Thank you, one and all.